Welcome to the Financial Advisor Success Podcast, where you go behind the scenes with financial planner, speaker, and consultant Michael Kitces to hear stories of how leading financial advisors navigated the inevitable challenges that arise on the path to success, and get insight from leading industry consultants about how to break through to the next level in your advisory business. And now here's your host, Michael Kitces.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 446th episode of the Financial Advisor Success Podcast. My guest on today's podcast is Misty Lynch. Misty is the owner of Soundview Financial Advisors, an RIA based in Walpole, Massachusetts, that oversees $46 million in assets under management for approximately 100 client households. What's unique about Misty, though, is how she grew her AUM by $30 million in 2 years, in part by being recognized as a financial planning expert within Facebook groups for her ideal target clients of small business owners and families in her local area. In this episode, we talk in depth about how Misty gained notoriety in key Facebook groups. For example, the Boston Business Women's Group, not necessarily by promoting her own business or content, but rather by being recommended by group members who were already familiar with her work. How Misty started creating personal finance blog content while she was still working in a corporate role at a broker-dealer, which gave her a running start when she did make the transition to client-facing advisor. And how Misty started a podcast that gave her access to key centers of influence, and such as estate planning and student loan planning attorneys, and led to referrals from these professionals down the line. We also talk about how Misty jump-started her firm ownership journey by buying a firm from a retiring advisor, which helped her avoid the time and effort involved in registering a firm from scratch. How Misty raised the fees on the firm's legacy clients with little pushback and created an ongoing service and fee model that reflected her desire to profitably have long-term relationships with clients, and how Misty made the decision to make her first hire to provide additional support during a period of rapid growth, helping her ensure that current clients remained engaged as she onboarded a number of new clients. And be certain to listen to the end, where Misty shares how she earned a life coaching certification that has helped her ask better questions to recognize clients' money mindsets, which eventually led to her writing a book on the topic, further enhancing her reputation. Why Misty previously chased financial designations in an attempt to make herself more credentialed as a relatively young advisor, but eventually recognized that she was already good enough to serve clients even without the various initials listed after her name. And how Misty transitioned from viewing success as a matter of personal and firm metrics and instead as a feeling that she's doing good work and is living her life in the way she wants to. And so with that introduction, I hope you enjoy this episode of the Financial Advisor Success Podcast with Misty Lynch. Welcome, Misty Lynch, to the Financial Advisor Success Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate you joining us today, and I'm excited to talk today about what it's like when you launch an advisory firm and you really want to hit the ground running when you launch. I mean, I think any of us, just when you get started as an advisor, when you get started any job and career, it's like, I want to do the things and make it grow and like get my income going. But I think particularly for those of us who come in as kind of career changers, when I was already doing another thing, and I'm not coming in my 20s, early career, I'm coming in my 30s or 40s, a little bit further along. Like the context just feels different, right? Like there's a spouse, there's a mortgage, there are maybe kids who are staring down college in some quantifiable number of years. We have a certain lifestyle we were accustomed to because of the salary income we were working with before. It's just that like the pressures show up differently, I think, when we're launching as career changers. And I feel like there's sort of general platitudes out there. Like when you launch, get the word out, tell all the people communicate back to them the new thing that you're doing now. But it's hard, it's awkward sometimes for the conversations. And unless you were like a power networking person in the first place, like that well can kind of run dry relatively quickly. There's only so many like personal friends and family who are going to take a leap with you when you get started. And I know you have lived a version of this journey over the past few years and have had incredible growth of like 30 plus million in 2 years of getting started and underway. And so I am really excited to talk about like what you really do when you are career changing in to get the proverbial, like get the word out that quickly and get business and growth growing so quickly when you launch and hang a shingle.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think that it is interesting. And I talk to a lot of different people who maybe were career changers like me that kind of happened around 2020 or age 40. And I feel like there was something that really started to get to me because I was in a good corporate job. I was paid well. Everything was fine. I just knew there was something else I wanted to be doing, that it wasn't quite exactly what the right fit for me. And so when I was thinking about, pros and cons, obviously very analytical about this decision to leave a pretty solid job. And obviously COVID hadn't happened yet. It was January. So a few months before
Okay.
that.
Okay. So this
And
isn't even a like
this isn't even,
COVID rocked my
yeah,
world and I
no,
was reevaluating my priorities. Like that's
no. This
coincidental
was
to
just
this.
just a fun coincidence that we couldn't
Okay.
actually go out and meet people. But yeah, so I really felt like, what's the worst case scenario? Because my father's an engineer. I've lived through businesses collapsing. Like when I was 10 years old, we ran out of money. Like no money, had to move, all of these things. So in the back of my mind, like I'm always thinking about like what's the worst case scenario? And I did think, okay, if I try this and it doesn't work, then I have skills that are marketable. I worked in compliance. I had all my FINRA licenses for another 2 years, that I could go back and find another job. And then it kind of clicked that I was choosing to live my worst case scenario every single day instead of
Oh,
taking
that's
a shot on what I really wanted to do with my life. And so that
I want to pause on that. Like that is like that's a really interesting way to frame it. I mean, just right. I'm at a place and stage in my career where my worst case scenario is I just go back and get another job doing things similar to what I'm already doing because I've got marketable skills and I'm an established professional in the marketplace. Like I get that. That's an interesting fallback unto itself, but like I can't help but chuckle. Like so if my worst case scenario is doing that and that is actually the job I already
that
have,
is
then I'm
that is
literally already living my worst case scenario by
exactly
doing
opting into that every day. And honestly, my worst case scenario wasn't bad because I had had a nice career where I have had those skills. I know there's a demand for that kind of work. I so like genuinely respect everybody out there who's working back office, in the home office, in compliance, all of those, in audit, all those things that I'd done in previous times. But it wasn't my dream. It wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. And so, I feel like it was time, it just this I didn't see anything changing really if I didn't make a move. And I'd run, I knew from what I'd been doing, working on the compliance end, reviewing sales material and advertising, that there weren't a ton of financial advisors that had a lot of their own content. I reviewed a lot of things that were kind of coming through that were already approved from a vendor, at the time, 2019, 2018, 2019, that time frame. And they were putting out a lot of the same stuff because I'd seen it on a mass end from like, obviously their audience would be different people, but there wasn't really anything that was very, you know, that wasn't new. And I think it was more because they didn't want to have to bother with compliance getting approval or whatever. But there was a
right.
few advisors who were like proactively working with me and my team to say, hey, I want to do a podcast. I want to do a blog, a newsletter. And we were really actually fine with it. As long as we approved it and they kind of, knew what the rules were, we were definitely willing to work with those advisors. And those people, I would always think like, that's what I need. I need content. I need to reach people. I need to communicate with people in a way that like really gets through to them. So in the back of my mind, like 2019, I decided to start a blog as an OBA. So I was working in corporate and it was an outside business activity I decided to be consistent and write a weekly blog about like I was going to stop shopping for a year because I felt like I had too much stuff. I was starting to like mindlessly spend money. And as somebody who's interested in money, I thought I would try this experiment and kind of blog about it for a year. And I thought that this would give me a base of some content. And so I just started to be, kind of looking at what other people were doing before I'd even left and thought, okay, this is important. This is how people actually, you know, let people know, more about them so people want to work with them. So I did that. And then when it was 2020, I decided to finally leave corporate, but I had about a year's worth of like marketing that I could cut up and use.
Yeah, so I'm intrigued by this. So tell me more about the blog that you were creating at this stage. Like how did you set it up? I mean, like, are you technically inclined that you can like stand up your own website and blog, or did you hire a person or buy a
Yeah,
thing off the shelf?
I
Like, I mean, how
actually
did you just literally get it going?
I was at a conference because I'd gone to some conference in my corporate role with advisor conferences. I'd gone to some of them, and I met a woman, Zoe Meggard. I don't know if she's changed her name at the time, but I met her, and we had an interesting conversation about what she did. And she helped people with their advisor marketing.
She was
So
doing
she had
perfectly planned
perfectly planned
content.
content. Yeah. And so we just kind of talked and I was like, what is the process behind it? And I just got really curious. And that's one thing that I think has been helpful for me is I don't assume there's anything out there that people are doing that I can't figure out how to do. I just have to get curious about it because I could have been like, nope, that's something that this person does. She's got skills that I don't. And she was really helpful. I paid her to help me set it up.
Okay.
And so she kind of set up like a pretty basic website, learned how to post something on WordPress, and update it. And I kind of outsourced somebody to help me get that going. And she was really, really helpful. And completely, one of those things where just talking to people, building your network and learning about other people that are doing things that are interesting, like how they do it and how could they help me? She was super encouraging, obviously. Because she likes marketing, and I helped her because I knew other advisors that needed marketing that I would say, hey, there's a person out there doing this. Like, do you want to meet her? And so it kind of, we kind of became friends for that, and got the blog up and running. And really it just was, I'm not a writer, so blogging wasn't exactly the perfect fit for me, but it was a way that, my corporate role, they didn't care because this was like, okay, you're just doing some writing on the side. It's not talking about specific investments or anything like that.
Right.
It was just basically financial literacy type of stuff. And so I just made sure that I wrote something every week about, sometimes I'd write about credit cards and, credit scores, or I'd write about, intentionally shopping, things you could do. So all these different things that I thought were just kind of crossing my mind that week, like a little diary.
So I'm kind of struck by the habit here. So it sounds like there was a real intentionality to, I'm going to have a weekly cadence. Like I'm
Yes.
going to write weekly. I'm going to make myself write weekly.
Once a week. Yep.
Uh Even though that wasn't necessarily a natural style for you to do writing.
Right. It was just something that I'd seen before, and I'd seen, a lot of the other advisors that I worked with. It's when maybe you put out something good, but then you don't put something else out for 6 months, and then it wasn't very effective. Maybe people wanted more or they wanted to read more. So I learned that consistency was very important when it comes to marketing, and blogging was kind of an interesting way in. Um, it did take a little, there was no chat GPT helping me put together a blog. So it was a little bit of a struggle, but I felt like it was useful. And I really understood, it made you think more about the topics you were writing about. I like doing research on different things. And so it just kind of became like a weekly project. Once I started podcasting, I realized I liked talking a lot more than I liked writing, but it was still a way to start to create content that could kind of live out there and then be repurposed once I finally bit the bullet and quit my job.
So when you were starting on this road, like how long were the posts? I mean, like how long of an article were you
I
trying
think they
to
were like
write for
800
yourself?
words. Yeah,
Okay.
they were like, just
Okay. It's a good
not
sized chunk. Yeah.
yeah, so, kind of trying to do that because I'd read what gets like I really, tried to figure out what I should be doing, and I kind of followed the rules a lot. Like if they said, "Okay, make it this many words with, some headers and things like that," that's how I tried to do it. Um, and I think that, it wasn't like it made me any money or was a success overnight, but it just made me have content that I could post on social media, go check out this blog, and it started to have people think about me and finances versus just me as their friend or me as the person in town or so it just kind of showed people like I'm comfortable talking about this stuff. Like I talk about this stuff a lot, which for some people they might not know even if they've known you a very long time.
That's interesting framing to me that uh right, when you're not an advisor already, right, your friends and family and personal network know you for a thing, right? You're in compliance at some financial
Yeah,
firm.
but they don't know
Uh
anything what that means.
right, yeah, but like they don't know anything what that means
Yeah.
beyond that.
Yep.
And for better or worse, like they've got you in that frame, right? You've got a compliance job for some corporate thing, not you're a financial advisor who talks about money. So I'm struck as how you're framing that okay, so I just started writing this and I just started sharing it out on my social channels that might have already been a lot of friends and family and colleagues, but now I'm starting to change their perception of me more substantively because they're seeing the steady drumbeat of content that I'm putting out from me talking about me things, but like it's money and finance stuff. It's not corporate things.
It did work out. There was definitely ups and downs with it. And I had to come up with content every week. So it wasn't just about like my current spending. It was about, um, you know, the psychology of money. I started reading a lot of different books, like, thinking like, about heuristics, all these things I kind of was able to learn about and write in a blog. And so
So,
it was,
so you had to
it was
like, you
fun.
had to go on a learning journey to find things to write about.
Yeah, I did, but I felt like this content base was going to be important at some point. Even if not too many people read it, it would give me some material to repurpose, to point back to, and it was just kind of a getting like a baby step into working for myself and having to not have a marketing firm or a team or anybody here to, to go to once I was on my own.
And so how were you trying to like just get the word out, get found? I'm a blogger now. I'm making
Yeah.
this content. Please, someone in the world, read it.
Yeah,
Uh,
so it was really social media. Like it was kind
okay.
of slow at first, kind of just my networks. But then when you used like different hashtags about the blogs and things that I was writing and people like Zoe and other people who had started blogs or financial coaches or people in the literacy space had talked about ways to get people to see your stuff. And so I kind of learned a little bit about that, a little bit about marketing and SEO and stuff like that. And it wasn't like I was super focused on it, like it wasn't my full-time job, but I was trying to learn like, okay, what worked? Okay, this worked. Oh, people liked this content. Maybe I could write more about that, to
I
see
was going to
kind
say,
of
so what
how things worked out.
what what worked? Like, I guess like either content wise or get the word out wise. Like what was actually working that got some traction for you?
Facebook was pretty good for me, and then Instagram because I would find a picture and then write a little bit of short content and then direct people to the blog. So it was kind of visual. LinkedIn at that point was somewhat okay, but I feel like most of my LinkedIn connections were other advisors that I'd
Okay.
known or
Yeah.
other financial professionals. So this was kind of a different track where I was in some mom groups in Facebook, and I was in some local business, local groups, and Instagram was just kind of more of I would just put things everywhere, and I used Twitter as well at the time to see where people found it, and I felt like Facebook and Instagram were a little bit um, more popular, and so I started to, just make sure that I consistently showed up everywhere, but those were the ones that really worked for me starting out to get people to read the blog or leave a comment or engage with it somehow.
And and so you said at the beginning, like when you started down this path, like you formally set it up as an OBA. But I mean, was there any money changing
No,
hands? Like, was there any
I
income
mean,
coming
no,
coming in? Like, was there a business in
no,
air quotes
this
as
is this
an outsized business activity?
I would say this was an expensive hobby.
Okay,
Money was going out maybe to pay for it. It wasn't very expensive, and I was saving money, not shopping so much. So it was kind of a wash, but I did set it up as an OBA, and I did set it up as an LLC so that I could use the expenses for running it because businesses don't have to be profitable at first. So, so my accountant knew what I was doing, but I kind of always liked the idea of having an outside business activity where I would be able to be more creative, maybe not limited to what I could say. But being in compliance for so long, I kind of knew what I could say and what I couldn't. Instead of feeling like everything is gonna be off limits, I shouldn't even bother.
and and so last just quick question on this. Uh, like, where did you actually like? What was the website? I mean, did you make intentionalspending.com
No,
because
it
that was
was
the theme? Did you do it under your name because Misty is writing it, so it's the Misty website? Like,
no,
where?
I called it not another thing .com because I think that was, like, the first post was, like, what it like, I think my mom asked what I wanted for Christmas, and I said, like, "Not another thing," like, because I don't like clutter, I get kind of when there's too much stuff, I get overwhelmed and upset, so that was what I decided to name it, and I did not put a lot of thought into it, Michael,
Okay,
it just was available, and I bought it. And then I was like,
cool.
"Should I just buy domains?" And this seems like a very interesting industry too, because it was like, "Oh,
They're pretty cost
this is for
effective. Yeah,
10,
yep.
yeah, $10." And so I just kind of started. I didn't expect it to be very, and I think that's one thing that a lot of people do is they expect everything to be like perfect, like A plus material coming out, of the gate. And I was happy with like B minus effort and having to change the name of it eventually or doing something, and then scrapping it or kind of reworking it, and just getting started.
So, what happened next? Just on this journey. It's 2020, you're thinking about alternatives, you've launched the blog, you've been writing for the better part of a year. So what happens next on
So
the journey?
yeah, so January 2020, I actually had left corporate and I'd gone to work. One of my old neighbors had been working at a firm nearby, and he'd seen me posting on social media. He'd seen me on wherever he saw me, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever. And he was like, I need more marketing at my firm. Like, what are you doing? Because I see you everywhere. So
Ah,
I was like, I'm still working, in Boston. I thinking about leaving though, and I'm thinking about starting my own firm. I had been lurking on the XYPN platform for a long time. I'm sure there's some shout out to my lurkers out there.
oh yeah,
I
yeah,
understand.
lots of
Yeah.
lurkers.
And so I had been really toying with leaving for way longer than anybody should. Um, but he was like, come work for my firm, come be an advisor. He offered me a small salary to kind of help with maybe doing some financial planning and maybe, helping with some marketing and social media stuff. And so I was like, okay, this is better than starting out with zero, going from six figures to nothing. It was. So I said I decided to do it, and so I joined their firm, and I worked there from 2020 to 2022. And in 2020, I was like the blog was fine. My year was up with that. And I had been a guest on a few podcasts when I was in corporate because they were starting to get into that and they wanted me to talk about certain financial planning literacy topics. And I loved it. I loved it. So I had gone to the firm and said, what are your thoughts about radio or podcasting? And they were like, we're open to whatever. They were very cool about like exploring different things. These guys were my age, like they were ready, they were building their firm really, really fast. And so I had a friend who was at iHeartRadio. And so I talked to him and he kind of pitched some ideas to WRKO in Boston about a financial, podcast. And here was my thought. I needed to get people to know who I could help. And also, I didn't have a ton of centers of influence, I think is the term that's commonly used for like connections or people who. And so my thought, and this is what I brought to the guys at my firm, I said, I don't know, I want to get to know some really, some business owners in this area. I love working with small business owners. What if I had a podcast and I interviewed them and talked about their business, how they help people, what they do, how their financial journey had changed from because most entrepreneurs started out wanting to do something else or thinking they would do something totally different than where they are today. And I would get to really know them in about a half an hour. And instead of being like, hey, can I pick your brain over coffee? Can I have you on my radio show or my podcast? Then they're going to come to me with like their best stuff. They're going to be prepared. They're going to have marketing material, which everybody wants. And it's not going to be annoying or the waste of their time or something like that. And so the guys were like, this, whatever, like whatever you think is going to work, we could try it. And WRKO actually, they liked it. Radio was expensive at the time. So I think that there was, that end of it too. So we tried a radio show for 6 months called I think it started out as Modern Money and then we changed the name because somebody else, another woman, lovely woman in Atlanta had Modern Money as her firm. And so she reached out to me and I was like, okay, I'll just fix it. Because I didn't get too attached to anything really at this point. So I changed it to Demystifying Money, which was something that somebody at my corporate job had come up with as a play on my name. And at first I thought, no one's going to take me seriously. I
Oh,
hate it. No.
because you're
And then I loved it.
Misty and
Yes.
you're demystifying money. I love it. I love
And
it. Okay.
I hated it at first because I thought I have to be a serious businesswoman. Like people have to think of me like, and then I was like, you know what? That's kind of actually cute. And so I stuck with it. And so we changed the show and we did radio for 6 months. COVID hit. Nobody was commuting. No one was driving to the Cape on Sundays. I thought I would have people in the car. And so we stopped radio, but I kept up the podcast because in that 6 months, I had weekly shows where I had a guest on. I got to know student loan attorney, estate planning attorneys, lots of different small business owners in my community. And it was a really, really great way to get to know people, build my network. And they started either becoming clients or sending me people because I'd helped them, or we got to know each other. And so that kind of helped me really kind of get my foot in the door as far as what I did in Boston because they didn't know me at all. And so, it really was kind of helpful to really start to build that network that way. So I stuck with the podcast is going on since 2020 and we're still doing it today.
I'm struck by again, just like the way you frame it, if I'm trying to get going as an advisory firm, I'm going to go out there and, try to meet with at least one business leader or
Yeah.
center of influence in my community every week, and hopefully take them out to lunch and get to know them a little bit. And maybe I build a relationship that goes well. Or I can run a podcast and invite them onto my podcast so they get some
They
free
get
marketing visibility, which makes them really want to do it and really want to show up and be really engaging in the conversation. And then they even feel gratitude to me because I like got them out there.
Yeah.
And it's really like, I'm going to have a similar conversation what I probably would have had over lunch anyways, but they're so much more engaged and excited to do it
Yeah. They
because
wanna
I,
be
I
there.
made a platform and they want to be on my platform.
Exactly. And so, like, "Hey, do you wanna come on my radio show?" was a lot better than, "Can I pick your brain?" Nobody wants like, people will do that as a favor and to be nice, but, like, they might wanna cancel that morning. They're not gonna get up, shower, and, like, be ready with their coffee. Like, "Let's go. We're hitting record." So, to me, I thought it was just a better way to offer something of value for people that I really wanted to work with and get to know.
So how did you find guests and do the ask?
So I really looked around, like, there were some people, when I was thinking about who I guess there's a lot of information out there about who financial advisors should network with,
Yep.
attorneys, accountants, yeah, all of these, different professionals. And so, or there's also like a lot of big financial questions that like I had come up. And so one of the first guests I had on was a website designer. She designed my website. And so I asked, the value of a website. Why should people put money into it? What is some of the basics and how she, kind of works with her clients to figure out how to present them well. And then she didn't have a 401k for her business. She didn't have, she was looking at all these things she wanted to do. And I was able to help her. And then there was like I started out with people that I'd kind of known, who were doing really cool stuff or who were referred all the time in some of the groups that I'd belonged in on social media. And so they were very popular to begin with. Other people who'd worked with them had really liked them. So I had a social media person on pretty much second. And she talked about social media and how she helps businesses grow. And then I had a student loan attorney on because that topic had come up and I was like, this guy's an expert. Um, I needed, I wanted to meet him really badly. And so I pitched Adam Minsky and he was delightful, came on my show to talk and like one of the nicest people that I met. And he afterwards we did become friends and like met for coffee and stuff like that. But he wanted to tell people how he could help them, and then, it just kind of went from there. Like if I saw somebody who was out there, maybe they were focused on the news or maybe I saw them somewhere, I'd find them and reach out to them and say, see if they wanted to come on the show and kind of, yeah, solve some problems. If people had divorce questions that came up a lot, I'd find an expert, see if I could help.
So so tell me a little bit more about like just literally how you made the ask. I mean, you're like you're cold emailing a stranger to be on your podcast and or radio show.
So it wasn't cold because what I would
Okay.
do first was find them. And I would
Okay.
find people that I really either wanted to connect with. And I would start to not like stalkery, like their stuff, like 10 things in a row where they would log in and be like, oh, wow, who's this person? They liked, 500 of my posts like last night. But I would start to comment on their stuff on LinkedIn or wherever. And then or share it if I thought it was interesting. I'd share some of their articles and things like that, and then I'd make an introduction to see if they wanted to come on the podcast. Um, so I didn't feel like a stranger to a lot of those people, even though I probably was.
Oh, interesting. So ideally, hopefully, like they've seen your name
A little
in
familiar,
their social
yeah,
media notifications
yeah.
or something before you do the outreach.
Yeah.
So
And I'd spend
it's
some time, yeah, because I think, I can tell who's engaging with my content. There's an estate planning attorney who's just started to, comment and share certain things that I'm posting. She's on my radar now. I feel like now I'm probably going to invite her to the show next, and she probably wants to be on it. And that might be why she's doing it. So it's interesting, but I think like that's how business kind of works. If I think someone's interesting or they share my stuff, you're genuinely you're going to be more open to that conversation. So that was my method at first. It was genuine. I really did like a lot of the people's what they were sharing was important. So
and and what was the hit rate? I mean, like how often did people actually say yes? How often did they decline?
it was pretty good. I mean, I really think there's some people that were like, I can't do it right away, but how can I meet with you in a couple months, or can I meet with you in a couple weeks? So I would say I never really had trouble getting guests on the show. Um, I might have had a few people that never got back to me that maybe were kind of like a longer range goal, like some people with huge platforms that were writing books or something like that I might reach out to see if they want to come on. Um, there might have been, yeah, maybe like 5 of those. But other than that, I tried to stay fairly local. And that was pretty helpful because then people saw me sharing stuff of people they know, and then they wanted to, they were more open to it too.
And just curious if you recall, like, what did radio actually cost for you to do this?
Yeah, I think the radio was I think a couple $1,000s a month, and it was split between me and my firm. I don't think it wasn't the right path, but it was compelling because a radio show is, interesting if somebody asks if you want to go on the radio show. But it wasn't the right fit. So I didn't stick with that too long. It was about 6 months, but then they were super nice. They gave me all the episodes and the Spreaker and the setup for the podcast. And so I just kind of moved on from there and kept the show going.
And did anything change in how you do the asks for guests, or got them to connect when it was a podcast versus a radio?
No, I just probably changed it to, we were formerly on WRKO and now this podcast, here. And it was, yeah, I mean, I included that, but not like just as where we'd been featured before. But it was true.
Very cool.
And some
So
people really like going on podcasts. A lot of the time, I'm the first podcast that people have ever done for some of the business owners and some of the people that I work with, which is really exciting. Except when they're super nervous and things like that. But it's still it's exciting. I think a lot of people enjoy that media still. Obviously, hopefully, as we're doing one today.
Feels good to be asked, especially if you've never been asked before as a local business owner. Like, that's
Cool.
really cool. So then what came next in the growth journey?
So I'd realized probably, I had trouble growing at the firm. The firm that I was with had some, they didn't have high minimums, but they had pretty high fees comparatively. So if somebody was just working with a financial advisor for the first time and wanted to look at what an average fee was, it was about 3 times that. And so and this was their firm and how they ran it. And so if they wanted, the fees to be what they decided them to be, instead of beating my head against the wall trying to get them to change or get them to be flexible with me, I realized that this was a better fit than where I was at, but it's still not exactly what I want. I didn't have enough control over certain things like the portfolio or the fee structure. And so I'd worked there 2 years. I had not grown very much, maybe from, from pretty much 0 to like maybe 5 million under management with people that I had a pretty strong relationship with. But it wasn't, it just wasn't the right fit. And they're awesome. I mean, they're really nice people. I'm still friends with them. And they just knew they hired a lot of people like them who wanted to, who were aggressive and wanted to run things and, try things and be innovative. But that doesn't necessarily make for the best team if all of us want to go do our own thing.
I mean, there is sort of a, you launched a firm and work on your own because you're innovative and like to try new things and don't want to have to answer to others. It's kind of hard to make a firm full of people like that for the same reason that you probably started your own firm in the first place.
So I had, there was, there was my kids, I'd walk them to the bus and there was always a firm kind of on the corner of the street. I knew it was one woman. I'd known her through NAPFA, nice person, really liked her. And so I would kind of walk my kids to the bus, walk my dog around the block and be like, this is going to be my walk to work someday. So I don't know how much you feel about manifestation or anything like that, but I really had like, I was closer to what I wanted to be, but this was exactly like where I wanted to be. And I had randomly run into Susan in the grocery store who owned Soundview Financial Advisors. And this was around the end of, 2021. And I mean, we still were wearing our masks. I could have easily walked the other way. She could have ignored me. But instead, I approached her and I asked how she was doing. How's business? And she was like, it's okay. How's business for you? Are you still over there? And I said, yeah, but I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to start my own firm. I noticed that there's an open office space in the building you're in. And I think I'm going to take it and I'm going to start my firm. I'm going to do it. And then the next day, she'd reached out to me and was like, I've wanted to retire for a while. I don't know what to do with all my clients. I don't have a ton of clients, but I really care about them. And she had a few large clients. She had about 9 million under management. And so she didn't have a ton of clients, but only like some firms wanted to take 2 of them. And then she wouldn't know what to do with the rest. And so she asked me to come back in. And then at that point, we kind of were like, look, I want to start a firm, and I want to start a firm right in this building. And I want, and you want to leave. So what about what if we made a deal? And at that point, neither one of us really knew how to sell a firm, how to buy a firm. We just kind of knew like this timing is right. I want what you got, and you want to retire. She wanted out. And so I reached then back out to my network, and I had I had some friends that I'd made through when I worked in corporate who were in RIAs or helping with valuations and things like that. And I was like, how do you buy a firm? How do I do this? And so I got really curious about like what were the multiples? What are the offers? And so I again had reached out to people I'd known to see, how to do this. And so I had, I had some help kind of putting together, a valuation of the firm, and I made her an offer. It was like 1 times revenue. And she was pretty much thinking that her firm was going to either just dissolve and her clients were going to go somewhere else and she would get nothing from it, or she would have to break it apart. And so she thought that sounded like a pretty good deal. And we worked together for 6 months so I could meet her clients with her, sit in their houses, chat with them. They felt comfortable knowing that Susan had kind of handpicked me and that I was not going anywhere for a while. But also, they didn't have to do anything. They were, going to be taken care of. And then 6 months later, she fully retired and I owned the business. So I got what I wanted. I didn't have to go dark. I didn't have to be a brand new firm, go through the registration. I was able to kind of take it over, and it just kind of worked smoothly. So there was not too much interruption for SoundView clients. And then, the few clients that I had came with me. And then I was able to kind of own it and do, and change it from there.
And so again, just for context here, so what was the size of the firm as you came in, I guess by assets or by revenue?
Yeah, so it was about 9 million under management, and she had not raised her fees in 13 years. So the revenue was about $90,000.
Okay. And and so as you came in to do this, like, did you have to pay it all at once as you did this purchase? Could you still finance it over a couple of
Yeah.
years? Like, how did you cash flow this coming
So
in?
she didn't necessarily want all the income coming in at once. So she, I
Good
gave
tax
her,
planning.
yeah.
Yep.
So I gave her, $15,000 up front. And then I had made payments for, 2,100 for 36 months. So I think, could she have sold the firm for more? Yeah, probably. But it was a fair deal that I think made her happy. I could afford it. Because I, kind of saved. I was saving money because I thought I was going to go out on my own and
Right.
have to, maybe have 3 months where I couldn't even talk to anybody, depending on how quickly Massachusetts got back to me. So,
Right.
so that was kind of that was the deal we came up with. And, there was, definitely, a few things that we needed a little bit of help with, but I think both of us ended up being very happy.
Very cool. So now you're on your own. You've got 10 to 15 million between what you bought and the few clients you had previously that came over. And now it's your firm.
Yes.
And game on.
Yes. Yes. So in 2022, I had, decided to, now that I owned the firm and that SoundView was my firm, these were my clients, I knew that this felt right. This was where I wanted to stay. I was thinking about, okay, how do I get more exposure? And then randomly, one of my friends that I used to work with in corporate had seen an Instagram post that said, we're like a casting call for somebody who was a financial advisor, and then also somebody who was, maybe a therapist or something along those lines to talk about like money mindset. And so she forwarded it to me and was like, oh, I think they need you because I was a financial planner and I got a life coaching certification in 2020 because I wanted to figure out how to talk to my clients better and be better at asking questions and the real problems that they had, because they weren't asking me for this in their portfolio or any of the questions that I thought. They wanted to feel different and they all had different things going on. So in my head, getting the life coaching certification made sense because life coaching had helped me kind of wrap my head around money.
So
So
what life coaching like certification or program did you pursue?
I went through the life coach school
Okay.
with Brooke
So what
Castillo.
is the life coach school for
So
those who aren't familiar?
basically, the whole time that I was thinking about leaving corporate, I had some real issues with like the fact that I never wanted to be broke again. Like when I was young, we had a lot of money from like, when I was born until I was about 9 or 10 years old. And then my father's business like had there was a slight recession in the early 90s that impacted him very hard. And so we sold our house, we moved to an apartment, we had to get rid of our dog. We went from having a lot to like nothing in my 10-year-old brain overnight. And so I had some real money mindset issues. And so I was always trying to achieve the next thing, the next license, the next, just really the next whatever I could get to kind of make sure that I was not going to be at risk of losing everything I had again. And it wasn't very easy to help clients with their money when you had all of these things in your head about money. And so I'd started listening to different podcasts about mindset, about growth, about, changing, kind of thought work really. And it had helped me really kind of expand what I could do, what I thought was possible. And so, and it really helped me clarify that my real goal was to be out there helping people, to work with them, to have my own clients, to run my own business. I wanted freedom with my time. I didn't want when my father was self-employed, I saw the dark side of it, but I saw the really good side of it too. Like he was at every single one of my games. I always could talk to him. He was never rushing me for something. And I really just kind of, there was a lot of good things that I'd seen too. But it took me a while to work on that fear of what if it fails? To get to the point of like, what does successful actually mean to me?
What,
And so
what if it doesn't fail?
what if it doesn't? Yeah. Like what if it's really good? Like what if it's beyond your like wildest dreams type of good? And so I'd kind of used that a lot to, for myself. And so I'd gotten that certification. I hadn't really used it. It didn't, well, I mean, I guess I used it in different ways. Every time I talked to clients, it was kind of, I would weave it in. Like I would really talk to them about different things than like, what type of, growth would you like to see this year in your portfolio? Like what, trying to get different questions to them. And so anyway, in 2022, this request came up for a person like that. And so I'd reached out randomly to this casting agent and said like, hey, I think I can help you. And so Million Stories Media was doing this TV show called Heartbroke that was talking with 10 couples about their money problems. And so I ended up going through this process and getting hired by them to work on this project. And so that was the first part of 2022. And Susan was like, wait, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go do a TV show. I'm going to get out there. People are going to know Soundview. I'm going to try to, reach as many people as I can. And so she was kind of like, okay.
Well,
What? Like, I don't
youngins
know.
these days
Yeah,
market it the way
totally.
we did it.
I
Market
mean,
it different, but I
right.
guess you be
You
you.
go ahead and try it. Like, this sounds really weird. Are you going to get, I mean, I didn't think I was going to get trafficked, but she was like, where are you flying to? Let me know when you get there. I was like, okay. But, so I just was like, I was really open to any kind of opportunity that kind of came my way. Um, and so, and I loved financial literacy. I loved talking to people. And this was just it was just like, I was open to different opportunities. And if it worked, then if it was like, it was kind of yeah, let's try it. And so I worked on that show, which was really interesting. And then I went back 6 weeks later to see how the couples were doing. So kind of like a little bit of a reality show.
Yeah, like makeover
Yes,
style.
exactly.
Before
And
after.
yeah, and then I got to know Million Stories Media and the Singleton Foundation, and they're just fantastic with their like desire to get financial literacy and entertainment put together to make it more consumable, more appealing, more real. And so I realized like like the conversations I was having with these couples, like it felt like this is exactly what I need to be doing. I loved working, just really kind of getting to the heart of the financial, you know, struggles that people have. And instead of my past being a problem that I should hide, like it was something that I could actually lean into to relate to more people because they understood that like I got how horrible it is to run out of money in this country. Like how time consuming it is to be poor and how much mental stress and like I had always for the longest time I thought that happiness was equal to success and like the more money you had the more happy you were because when I was little and we had money my parents didn't fight. So I thought that was happiness. It took me a while to again work on those things to realize like, okay, getting, another designation does not mean I'm a success. It also doesn't mean that I'm happy. It's just, trying to figure it out with like, obviously what limited information I had as a kid, it just seemed like money was it. And for a lot of these couples, it wasn't money that was the problem. It was communication. It was trust. It was all sorts of different things. So just kind of looking at the whole work that we do from this bigger lens of like, and that's why I love, the talks about, financial, not just financial literacy, but kind of like the feelings and the thoughts behind it. So I really felt like everything that I'm trying to do now was just kind of pushing me more into that lane of, you know, the behavioral finance and like why we do what we do and how we can kind of make some changes. And so a lot of you know, I wrote a book in 2022 kind of about the thoughts and the mindset work that I'd done to try to help other people, to help my clients who were dealing with these things. And then I just kind of kept leaning into the press and the podcasts and things like that.
All right, wait. So where did a book come from when you earlier were like, I'm not really writing inclined and I'm working
Yeah.
on 800 word blog posts. So like, where'd the book come from?
I think that I love speaking and I liked being on panels and things like that very much. And somebody had told me, oh, if you want to really get booked as a speaker, you have to have a book. And so again, I said, okay. And I put that on my list of things to do for work. And
Okay.
one of the people that I had interviewed on the podcast was a writing coach, and she helped people self-publish books. Her name was Jatsana. She had a nice business, and someone had asked if I would have her on my podcast. So I met with her, and I learned from her about the process. And so I'm like the type of person where if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And so she had a process where they could angel write for you, where they write the book kind of after interviewing you.
Yep.
And then she had a process where you'd have a book coach where they would say, I need a chapter by Friday on this, and then we're going to talk about it. And then you had there was another option. I think that was a little bit less hand holding. But that middle option of having somebody be like, hey, Friday, we're going to work on this chapter about boundaries, or we're going to work on this chapter about time management or goal setting. And I was able to, like I'd done with the blog, get my words done and get it to her on that weekly basis. And so with that goal setting approach, we were able to get a book done in about 6 months.
Okay. I was
And
going to ask,
again,
so how long it
yeah,
took? So 6 months of, I just make a dent every week and
every week.
eventually it adds up.
Yep. And again, and this is I would say I'm still a work in progress as far as like my, thoughts about success, because I think, okay, well, successful planners have a book. Successful, they have this. And then you go get it and do it. And then I kind of just put it on the shelf. So I felt like it was helpful to have a book, but I didn't, you know, I feel like if I was to do it again, I've seen what other people are doing where they're doing a different launch. They're doing not just checking it off the list of things to do. And so it was good though. It was again just more material, more stuff that kind of reinforced that this is what I like to do and this is what I talk about. And I can help people because it was hard to help everybody as a financial advisor, especially if they were starting out from, nothing, where maybe a book would be more in their price range than a financial plan. So I liked having a lot of different ways to kind of having something instead of being like, no, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Be like, I don't think this is the right fit right now, but I'm gonna, I can send you my book, or this is it, just to kind of have more ways to communicate with people. And yeah, the book was just one of those ways to do that. I love to read, but yeah, writing was kind of a struggle. But again, when someone else was kind of asking for my homework to be sent in, like I got it done.
So now help us understand like when and where this starts turning into in business, in
Yeah.
revenue, into clients coming in.
Yeah. So I would say, 2022, when I took over the firm, was doing the television show, writing the book, like that was a lot of head down work. It wasn't a ton of necessary like growth. The firm had grown. I had gotten some clients, but I would say probably like all of the effort started to pay off, in 2023 when the firm went, it basically doubled, you know, because I I really got clear on like, 2022 I was trying to figure out like, okay, I have to talk to these clients that I just took over about raising their fees to, and that was kind of like a mindset fear like, oh, what if they all say no and they all leave? They didn't. But it was like, how do I want to help people? What do I want the fees to be? Do I do flat fee planning? Do I do hourly? All of the things that I was trying to figure out as now this is my business. How do I run it? And like, what's the best use of my time? And so I was doing flat fee plans for like $2,500. And I was, trying to, you know, pretty much figure out how I could make anything work for anybody versus what actually works for me. And so that was kind of where I got a little bit more clarity from like 2023 to 2024, like of what I actually liked to do and how I liked to help people, how busy I actually wanted to be, like time wise. And so kind of normalized the fee structure, realized I like ongoing financial planning work and I like the AUM work, but I don't really like the one time or the hourly things. So, just kind of figuring out exactly
What
where I wanted the business to be.
what what made some of those more or less appealing for you?
I think that I would talk, sometimes I would do like a one-time plan for somebody and then I wouldn't know if anything got implemented or if it actually like if they were how
Mm.
they were doing. Um, I think I get too invested in people and like wanting to, you know, I'd always wanted that was the hard part about all the other roles that I was in. Like these clients weren't mine. Like when I was in court, I would, you know, when I even just started doing financial planning, like and then I'd have to be like, okay, well, then go have somebody else implement it or something like that. It was just, it wasn't enough, like start to finish. So I kind of like a longer term relationship with my clients. Um, and then some people would come back to me after we'd done a plan a year later and everything was different. They had different jobs, they lived somewhere else. And I was like, I want people who have these expensive questions because most of the people I work with are probably in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Like they're still making these huge changes and decisions, but like they had to decide like, is this worth another $2,500, $3,000 to talk to her about it or not? So I kind of liked having more of an ongoing, we're going to talk every, at least, every 3 months or something like that, every 4 months, just to even make sure that things don't go too far before we're on each other's radar again. So that just kind of was a personal thing for me. I know plenty of people who um, do like flat fee plans and love that. And, also it's been helpful to kind of meet other financial advisors and figure out how they help people so I can have the right people to refer to for people who aren't a great fit for me instead of trying to make everybody a great fit for me.
So then what did you do with respect to fee changes? Like what changed?
Yeah. So um, some of the clients that I got when I acquired the business were at like, 50 basis points or something like that. Like she really didn't have a very set structure. So I kind of put in a very set, it's 1% under a million. And then I had, broke down after that. And that this was kind of what everybody is going to be on. For those people who had been with her for a while, I did explain that, costs have increased. There hasn't been a fee assessment since the firm was founded in 2010, and everybody thought it was fair. So that was fine. And then the clients who'd come with me from my last firm, they just got a big discount because the fee over there was 3%. So,
Was 3%,
correct.
as in like an advisory fee all in?
So that felt too high for me from my compliance background. I mean, it's fine. They can do whatever their clients want to do, but for me, it felt like this was just about right. And then I started to look at the size of the accounts that I took on because for a while I wanted to help a lot of everybody. And so it would be really, smaller accounts. And then figuring out that like, really now at this point, it's kind of like 500,000 or more is what I like to, have as a minimum. Or we have this offer where you could do ongoing financial planning for starting at like $5,000 a year. Kind of felt right to me. That might change in the future, but at this point it felt right.
So, but do I still have the planning fee once I get to 500,000 of assets, or
No.
it's like planning? So I effectively kind of like a $5,000 minimum fee
Yeah.
nominally to cover all the financial planning and work. And once your AUM would take you over a $5,000 fee, you're simply paying AUM.
Yeah. And that's, again, could
Okay.
evolve, could change. I see people that are, raising their fees and have different minimums and stuff. And it's like, for what feels right now might not feel right next year, but it's like kind of open to like, I don't really have to do what anybody else says or thinks is right. if I feel good about it and I feel like the value is there. And I think what's more likely is, as the firm grows, trying to find things that add more value to those relationships and charging accordingly for that.
And breaking the news to prior clients, you went in the context of just the firm was founded in 2010. It's been a long time. We just have to update fees. And so was it mostly was it mostly changing AUM fees, or
Yes.
putting minimums?
They were,
in place?
mostly for that group, it was just changing the AUM fees. And
Okay.
then the ones that were under a minimum, I still worked with them because that was part of the deal, but it was, it wasn't too many people. So, and they were all like, okay. I mean, most of them had been familiar with letters from their, obviously, again, this was, during COVID as well, when that letter went out. So, everything was getting a little bit more expensive. And so it was just making sure they saw the value there and that I was, proactively reaching out to them, that they were happy.
And you sounds like you did it by letter. It wasn't necessarily by meeting phone call.
It was both. It was
Okay.
both. I sent a letter out, and then I also had reached out to people to make sure they got the letter and talked to them about it. And most of them understood that it made sense.
Well, or failing anything else, they get really upset and indignant and say, well, then I'm leaving and find another advisor. And then they go talk to another advisor. It's the same 1%.
Yeah, basically it was pretty much like, this is kind of, from what I've seen, this is really, what's fair, or kind of what's average out there. And also, it was hard when I was looking at people, even with the financial planning, I couldn't find anybody in my area that was, doing flat fee plans for what I'd started out doing them for. So basically, if people thought it was too expensive, I'm like, I can't even help you find less because I don't know if it's out there anymore.
Yeah.
And so that was something too that kind of just reinforced, like, nope, this actually probably has to happen to be a firm that, stays in business.
And so now, as the growth started to come in 2023, just where was it actually coming from? I mean, now you'd done the TV thing and the book, and you had like the blog that you put on social media, and you're like a few years into the podcast now. So where did the business actually start showing up from? Like, which of these channels was getting you results?
Yeah, so I would say that I probably got, a lot of my business was from like Facebook groups. I'd been
Okay.
pretty active sharing like weekly content in things like, Massachusetts business, Boston businesswomen's groups, everywhere that I just showed up. And so I noticed when people would do a search for, hey, I need a financial planner, I need a new financial advisor, people were putting my name in there. Some people had been guests on the podcast that referred me a lot. Some people I'd never met were putting my name in there for people. And so I would get a lot of people who just, and then when I'd see myself tagged, I would respond with my Calendly link. And then a lot of times it wasn't necessarily even the original poster who would set up time on my calendar, but I would get like 4 other appointments from people who were like looking and maybe thought, oh, I should do this too. So that was just, it's not something that I've heard a lot of people talk about, but I felt like that consistent showing up and providing value and information, it got people to the point where they felt like they'd known me when they hadn't. So their decision making to work with me was a lot quicker than having to interview 5 other advisors, most of them had already decided that they wanted to work with me, and they just wanted to find out more about like what the process would be and what it would look like, which was a very warm way to get clients that I hadn't really been introduced to yet. So I think that that social proof and the just having stuff out there. So if people were like scrolling and like, oh, I should think about that too, and then they dug a little deeper to find out more about me and how I help people, there was a lot of stuff out there to find. So that was probably one of the biggest ones. The podcast was helpful. I did get a lot of clients who were actual guests on the podcast or referrals directly from them. And then being a part of different networking groups like the Women's Business League and things like that, I feel like my network has been really, really helpful, um, to just, help out, somebody's client if they need it. And then, usually all of that would come back around, the time I spent with other people.
So when you're doing this in areas like Facebook groups, can you share like examples of what kinds of groups you were getting involved with? I mean, just like Facebook has so many bajillion groups in so many different ways. Like what I'm just trying to visualize, like what kinds of groups or organizations were you finding that you were able to get in there, you were able to get some traction with?
Yeah, so the Boston Businesswomen group it's over 40,000 people.
Okay.
So it's a large group. And there's a lot of, and I'm in the Boston area, there's a lot of, I like working with people who are self-employed. I like working with people, who have maybe some more complicated financial planning, whether they're in corporate and have stock options or different things, or they have 2 different forms of income in their family where one is maybe more stable than the other. Those are kind of the people that I like working with. So a lot of my content talks to those things, to things business owners can do, people with multiple, different irregular income sources. And so those were the articles that I was posting. Also, I was interviewing a lot of people on the podcast from the Boston Businesswomen's group. So they would then share it to the Boston Businesswomen group. So people who were friends with them or followed them were directed to my podcast. And so that really started to help when it came to if anybody was looking for a financial advisor, that was a very easy way to say, oh, yeah, go talk to Misty. Like I just spoke with her for half an hour, or she helped me with this. And so kind of that was a really, and 40,000 people in a group is huge. That like, so
I mean, like 40,000 people in a group is larger than a lot of towns
yeah,
in the ag, and towns have um uh uh non-business owners and children and dependents, like a lot of
yeah.
other people you can't work with. Like you can only work the portion of a 40,000 person town. So it's like 40,000 actual qualified prospects. So it's like 100,000 person city to get to that many prospects. Like this, it's interesting to me in that context when you know, so many of us have always built business by getting known, liked, and trusted in our quote unquote local community. And so like your local community could be Facebook organized and be larger than an actual town.
Which is wild because it seems
Yeah.
like, but it was, and they did, the best of, last year they did like the best of for 2024. And so they voted me the best financial advisor 24. I mean, all of those things then get kind of promoted and shared. All of us are business owners or working in business or thinking about it. And so that just really helped kind of solidify like a place in there saying like I'm a lot like you. I think about the same things you think about. Think about taxes. I think about all these things that we have to deal with as a business owner. And then I think a lot of times, with my dad being a business owner, like there wasn't a lot of people to help him. There wasn't a lot of conversations about, hey, you should put some of this money away. You should do something besides, buy a cooler car or a boat when you had money. And so I'm like, what kind of help would have been useful back then, starting out? Or, how do you actually think about this stuff? If say you're really good at what you want to do, but maybe that's like taking pictures or designing, giving people fashion advice. It's not business. It's not the money side, but they all have those same issues and questions. So kind of trying to fill that space because I think it's super important to, if people are all just trying to figure it out on their own, which is really hard.
So I'm curious to understand a little bit more what you uh like what you did, how you showed up in the Facebook group. Because I know just different online groups have different styles and sort of culture and rules around them. For some, like they're very, limited or anti self promotions. Like you can have conversations, but like don't ever post your own stuff. That's verboten. From what I'm hearing, it sounds like that's actually a little bit different in the context of this group because you actually were posting some of your own article content or podcast content. So share a little bit more, just like what were you doing in the group? Like how did you show up? What did you do to start getting noticed, building traction, building your reputation in the group?
Yeah, so I would look at the group rules. And so for something like the Women's Business League or the Boston Businesswomen group, they might say on Tuesdays you can share a tip or you could share, you can promote on specific days. And so I had a lot of like short form video that I was doing. Every month I have like once a week a short form video. Once a week I'm doing a podcast that's completely separate. And so I would just schedule those videos to show up on Tuesdays, or on those particular days. And then, kind of just to fit in with the group rules. Also, if somebody was posting anything financial related, a lot of times I would get tagged. So I would make sure to go in and either comment. And I'm very careful about like giving financial advice on social media. I don't
Sure,
think
sure.
it's a good idea. But I would say, this is an article that, or I wrote this blog that might help you, or I recorded this podcast with this person who does estate planning. You might learn a little bit from that. So kind of sharing things that I'd done or that I think would be valuable to them. Not
But
so
now
much
like
in a
you're not going out there and self-promoting
no.
your own content in posts. It's literally like someone asked a question, someone else tagged Misty, like, hey,
Yeah.
you should get in here.
Mhm.
And now you're just literally giving a helpful reply, like, hey, I actually did
Yeah.
a podcast about the exact thing you're
Yes.
talking about. Like,
Yeah.
here's a really useful resource to answer the precise
Yeah.
question that you're asking.
Yep. And then just trying to, yeah, help there. Or also, if I see people looking for other things, making sure that I'm tagging those people that I'd interviewed or those people I'd met that have those other different skills that people are looking for. So trying to make sure that I'm engaged in there enough. I wouldn't say I spend a ton of time on social media. It might sound like I do, but it's all kind of planned out in the beginning. And then like, kind of targeting different months, like tax season. I might talk a lot about taxes, and I might share those tips or, year end planning and, you know, open enrollment, stuff like that, that might be on people's minds at that like right exact time and trying to make sure that like if they, if it's helpful to them that I can kind of serve it up to them at the right time.
I'm fascinated by a lot of this that notwithstanding the amount of content you started to create, the podcast, the blogs, the book, it sounds like it wasn't just literally the content going out there and like a random stranger sees your blog post and says, I want to work with you, or here's a podcast episode and says, I want to work with you. It's uh the guests you invite on the podcasts become relationships and centers of influence. It's the community that you're getting involved in. The content becomes a way to show that you have expertise on a thing because you wrote an article about it, you did a podcast on it, which is like even more credible than just typing out a response online, perhaps. So like it was you distributing the content, like using the content in relevant places in the communities that you're trying to show up with, that drove the outcome more than just literally like I made the content and when people hear it, they reach out and call me to do business.
Yeah, because I feel like that doesn't happen, unfortunately. I know from having a very unsuccessful, like a blog that made no
Yeah.
money for an entire year. And the podcast isn't really a money maker either. And I went to Jolt and talked about it. And I talked to Altruist about too, like the podcast and how I use it, which is very different than how a lot of other advisors use it, where they're just on talking like maybe themselves and sharing information and getting people to come to them for that reason because they're an expert and like having a lot of success that way. Mine is I like talking to people and kind of building a big network. And so that's how I used it and how that led to clients. So there's a lot of different ways for it to work. It really just depends on like, kind of how you want to grow. But just by having it and recording it once doesn't really bring in clients. It's really kind of whenever anybody's looking for something that I have in that content bank, like firing it back up, sending it them their way, because this content exists, but it can also get really, it could just kind of sit there and never be looked at again. So realizing that like people And I think a lot of times when it comes to social media or advertising or marketing, I think a lot of us feel like people are going to get sick of seeing us, or we can't be too out there. We can't, be in people's faces too much. So we should really limit it to like a little bit. And I think that's really not true. I think that, most people don't even see your stuff the first time.
Well, I was going to say, like, social media algorithms in practice are so curated that
Yeah.
the people who don't engage with your stuff basically won't see it much anyways. And the people
Yeah.
who do engage with it a lot will, which is good because they engage
They
with it a
like it.
lot. So they're probably not going to be bothered. Like, the
No. And like you think about the
social media
people
algorithm kind
yeah.
of makes sure you don't overdo it.
They will, yes, you can't overdo it. And the people that like love you and love hearing from you because they're clicking on your stuff or liking it so much, like they're not going to be like, they're going to enjoy it. They're going to like, I can't think of any of the business owners that I love and that I talk to or my clients. When I see their stuff, I'm like, I love it. I think it's fantastic. I'm proud of them. So I just like it even more when I see more of it. So that's just one of the ways that we kind of like to stay small, and people are going to hate it. People are going to think that I look awful on video, or you can do that because you like video. And I'm like, no, I don't. Nobody likes listening to their own voice or seeing like themselves. You just do it anyway. Like it's fine. It's fine. No one cares.
So where does the business stand today then? It's like, bring us up to present on
Yeah.
what it
So
looks like now.
as of today, I've got like 11 ongoing financial planning clients who are people that just pay the annual fee. They want to meet and talk about, their financial situations, and they don't have assets to manage. And I feel like that that's it's a
So
good
those are the
place
like
to get. Yep,
$5,000
those
minimum
are
planning
them.
fee clients.
Yeah. And they're all so different. I couldn't say that I serve them all in the same way. One guy just
Okay.
loves to talk about the market because no one wants to talk about the markets with them. And then other people are like planning early retirements and stuff like that. And it's cool. Whatever. Like, I can adapt to like their needs and what makes them feel better about, their finances at the time. And then we've got about 73 clients with assets that we manage. Um, and that is we're at 46,167 dollars and eight. Yeah. So yeah, 46 million as of
Up
this morning.
from
Up from
like nine that you bought
yeah,
plus a couple million
yeah,
that came over from the
yeah,
prior firm in
2022.
2 years.
Yeah. So it went from like 9 million to 20 million, and then in 2023 to 2024, 20 million to 41 million by the end of, and then since this, the past, the start of 2025, it went from 41 million to 46. So steady growth.
And it continues with networking in the Boston Business Women Group Facebook, networking Women's Business League, and then relationships from the podcast guests itself, who it sounds like are often people from the Boston
Those groups.
Business Women Group
Yeah.
or the Women's
Yeah.
Business League. Like, you're
Yeah.
the the content guests are in the same community that you're
They are.
otherwise building into the
Yeah,
community
and
with.
it's kind of like I know there's a lot of clients all over the place, but it's like I understand New England. I understand like what it costs to live here. So I kind of understand um them really well. So it's a good fit. It works. I think that a lot of times, a lot of women, especially a lot of women, starting a business or growing a business, they haven't exactly gotten a ton of financial education from anybody in their lives. And so having a person that they can relate to. And I would say when I first started, like in the like in like the early 2000s or after I graduated, I thought being a woman was like the biggest drawback that I could have possibly had to deal with in financial services. And then learning like there's not much I can do about that. Like I should probably, you know, embrace that being authentic is way more important than trying to be like a imitation version of somebody else who's been successful in this industry in the past that I'd seen from like the other advisors I'd worked with in corporate and stuff. Like I wasn't going to be them. I wasn't going to get clients on the golf course. I wasn't like it had to be different, and I had to find out who I really really liked working with, and then what they need, and like how I can show up for them in like the best way.
And is it you on your own, or is there team support in place now?
So when I took over the firm, there was one woman who was working as a financial planner very independently, very part-time. And her name's Gina, and she's still here. So she has some of her own planning clients, a couple that she works with. And so she operates kind of, under the umbrella here, but maybe when her kids are a little older, she might start to ramp up her business and things like that, which is good. And then I hired somebody in August of 2024 who was a CFP candidate. and she needed to pass the CFP and get some experience hours. And so she'd been, she was at a firm and it wasn't a great fit. I ended up meeting with her and bringing her on board to kind of help with a little bit of pair planning, and some client kind of making sure I was reaching out to people enough, kind of that more administrative business end of it. And so she joined the firm and we've started working on like segmenting the client, getting like some workflows in place and things like that, which has been really helpful. And she ended up passing the CFP in March. So now we're at a new spot where I'm trying to figure out how much of her work she wants to continue to do for the firm as like administrative and backup, or does she want to start, being out there getting clients? And so it could change, again, like I'd mentioned at the firm that I was with before, you hire a lot of people who are like you. And then you wonder like, well, they want to run their own thing. But I'm kind of open to whatever I can do to help her grow. Um, and hopefully she stays here and grows her business here, but also, thinking about like what does she want her future to look like as a CFP, and just trying to, you know, I think I think there's more of us needed. I think we need more CFPs. We need more women out there. We need more people doing this work. I certainly can't help everybody myself. So um, it's great to kind of, hopefully start to build a path for more people. But it's pretty small, pretty small.
Because it sounds like for where you pulled the trigger, it must have been like 60, 70 clients
Yeah.
was like getting to the breaking point
Yeah.
of I just need another
Yeah.
person.
I really
I need more
felt
hands
like
on deck.
there was stuff that I wanted to do at that point that I wasn't doing. I was doing the stuff that I had to do. Um, and there was a couple times where I felt like I haven't talked to this person in a while, and just kind of making sure that things didn't kind of slip through the cracks. And so I'd actually spoke at a conference for the FPA about like succession planning. And so there was a panel of people who'd bought businesses and a panel of people who sold businesses, and one of the women on the panel that sold a business was a peer of Susan's. So she came up to me afterwards and was like, you need to meet this woman. She's so great. She's getting her CFP. She's worked in different, client experience type of roles. And so I just listened to her and met her. I really hadn't planned on hiring. I hadn't really put anything out there, but I decided that, it would probably be a good idea to talk to this person and see what she did at her other firm and see how she could help and what she was looking for. So it kind of just fell in my lap and I went with it. And then of course I was like, oh my God, can I afford to hire somebody? All of these things. And I kind of looked, talked to my bookkeeper and my accountant and figured out a way to do it. Because again, I try to just be open-minded, like with the things that I could be doing with my time if I had more of it.
I was going to say, like, where was gross revenue by the time you're deciding to pull this trigger?
Yeah, so I would say, we were probably like maybe maybe it was like 200,000, like 250, it felt like good. Like I felt like I could afford to bring somebody else on. If I wanted to grow, I think I knew that I needed some help or else I'd have some people start to leave because I wasn't working with them. So I
Well, I
think
guess
like
when
it's,
you're growing that quickly as well, like your forward-looking revenue will
yeah,
look a lot better
a lot
than
better.
your past 12 months
Yeah.
revenue as well, as you're thinking like going forward,
Yeah.
can I
Because
afford this?
right, because when I was making like 100,000, I didn't think I could give somebody 40, $50,000, like I was like, no, I need all of it. But it was starting to get to the point where I was seeing like, okay, more businesses coming in. I'm getting actual more potential, more leads coming on the calendar. Maybe she could start taking some clients, if she passes the CFP, and, you know, maybe we can, help more people. So, and I was really just like, it was really hard for me to like not help somebody out who was looking to pursue this industry. Um, it's kind of just felt too off brand for me to say no. I had to do it.
So what surprised you the most about building your own advisory business now that you're several years into it?
Yeah, so I think what surprised me the most is how much I enjoy it. Not that like I feel like it, what I've seen and what I'd read, it sounded like you're going to eat ramen for 3 years. You're going to, it's going to be painful. It's going to be so hard. And that wasn't my experience. Um I felt like success, it wasn't like corporate where you get paid this and then you get this bump and then you move into this salary band and it's very linear. I felt like growth And money, depending on how you think and feel about money, you can make these like quantum leaps in months. Like it doesn't necessarily have to take so long for it to be successful. But I feel like there is a lot of that out there where I assumed like, okay, I'm going to be broke for a little while. This is how we're going to do it. And it just wasn't that way. But I think the more I started to enjoy where I was at right now versus thinking about once I get to 50 million, I could be happy. Once I get to 75 million, I could be happy. Like I could be happy at 9 million. I could be happy at 20 million, be happy at 46, like it didn't matter. Like that was a choice to feel successful that was available to me anytime I wanted it. And I think that the less I felt like I had to be graspy and help anybody and try to desperately get clients to survive, the better clients I got because nobody's really attracted to that kind of energy when it comes to money. And so really doing some more, I think the work that I'd done on my own mindset had really helped me um, with this experience as I started took over the firm with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questions to where it's at now, which just felt pretty you know, I don't want to say easy, but kind of easy.
So what was the low point on this journey for you?
The low point, I would say it was probably like it was probably back in the like I said before, I think I probably wanted to leave. I wanted to actually be a financial advisor, and I got my CFP in 2011. And I really, really wanted to help clients and work with people. And I remember so many things I'd heard, when I'd worked, in different jobs, like you're not going to make any money just doing financial planning. Like you're going to have to work with millionaires. You're going to have to do this. Nobody's going to like I remember somebody telling me that nobody's gonna wanna work with somebody who grew up broke, and I believed that. Like, I believed all of these things that people had told me for quite a long time. Like, people aren't gonna wanna necessarily give a lot of money to a woman. People are not necessarily gonna you don't have, you don't have a natural market. You don't have family members to go pitch to. Like, you don't have this. And so I believed them instead of thinking, like, that they could possibly be wrong about that. And so after like starting I think I started the CFP training in like 2006 and then finally like finished the courses in 2011 and passed the exam because I took my time with it. Um, it took
Because
me
you were already convinced it wasn't going to be
I was
viable,
convinced
because
it
that's
wasn't
what
gonna
everyone was saying.
work. Exactly. I knew I was good at taking tests. I knew I was good at studying. I had started, I had every FINRA designation I could get thinking, well, if I get this one, then people will think I'm successful. Or if I get this, then people will think that I'm worthy of working with. And like now I'll talk to people who say the same things to me, like, well, I can't do this until I have a CFP because no one's going to want to work with me if I'm not a CFP. And half the time I'm like, no one's going to like, people are going to want to work with you or they're not. Like, do you think that they're going to want to work with you? Do you think you deserve to get clients? Because I didn't at the time. That was the real problem. It wasn't that no one wanted to work with me. It was that I didn't think I was good enough. So I think that the low point was probably sitting on all of those thoughts for years and believing that they were true and waiting until like I was 40 years old to actually like make a move and like do what I wanted to do. Um, because yeah, I was just so afraid of if it didn't work out.
So then, like, what do you know now you wish you could go back and tell you from 15 years ago?
Yeah, I
Like, how
would
would you
say,
reframe
yeah,
it back for yourself now?
I think I would kind of reframe things to make sure that like, and this is, if you're a younger advisor out there listening and you're thinking, well, no one's going to want to work with me until I'm 40, like it's not true. I think that you have to really, I think you have to be really clear on who you are, what you want to do, how you can help people. And if you know that you can help somebody, that's really what most people care about. It might not be where you went to college or your certifications or your designations, but if you could be really clear about how you help people and it can be genuine and authentic, then I think that that's something that is, probably one of the most useful things in this business. So, I know we talk a lot in the industry about, finding your niche or finding like, but really find out who you like, who lights you up, who do you love helping, and like, what do you know that you're good at? And then kind of figuring out like, how do I let everybody I can know about this? Because we might assume everybody already knows what we do. They don't. They probably don't, or they might not think about it at the right time. So really, like, how can you how can you share enough and make people know who you are and how you help them?
So what advice would you give other younger, newer advisors looking to come into the profession today and navigate their path?
Yeah. So I was a bit of like a designation chaser. I thought the more like numbers and letters I had next to my name, the more people would want to work with me. And I love the education piece. I will say that. Like, I think that if you're not like constantly trying to learn and innovate and change, that it's going to be a tough industry for you. But you don't necessarily have to like be perfect before you could present yourself to the rest of the world. And start helping people because I think people care a lot less about having the perfect advisor versus having somebody that they really like working with, or that they can relate to. So figure out like what that is for you versus once I get here, then I'll be able to relax or be happy or get clients. It's really just more getting out there and getting started, even if it's not even if it's not perfect work.
So what comes next for you at this point?
So, um, yeah, like, well, one, we're kind of working about like how to develop the team and kind of grow to decide like if we're going to have a lot of CFPs working here or if it's still going to be small. And also, I had an interesting opportunity with somebody that I had on the podcast who owns. Founded a fintech firm called Brightfin, which is like it's basically a budgeting app. And so she's looking to have me help them kind of with some speaking and some financial literacy events to kind of promote financial, budgeting and different things people can do to start to get more awareness around their money. And so I've, started to, help them out because I think there's a lot of different things going on in the industry which are really cool. And fintech is one of them. I think and I do love, the speaking, the being able to like talk to other people in larger groups and platforms about how they can start to kind of get control of their money because I think that awareness is really where everything starts. And I talk to people who have a lot of money that have no idea where it's going or what's happening
Right.
to it or why they
Yep.
don't have more of it. And so really things that can just as long as it feels like I'm helping more people handle all of these things, it seems like that one fits, which is kind of that's kind of a new thing that I'm learning. I don't know much about the startup space or getting investors and things like that. So that's kind of a new thing that I'm learning, which has been really cool.
Very cool. So as we come to the end, this is a podcast about success. And one of the themes that comes up is just that word success means very different things to different people. And so you're on this like wonderfully successful growth path with the firm, and 30 million in 2 years, pretty astoundingly successful growth. And so to me, like the business is in a wonderful place and continuing to grow. How do you define success for yourself at this point?
Yeah, it's definitely changed. I used to see success as money, as basically profit, accomplishment, achievement, popularity. That was in my head what success was. And I think now that I've kind of done some more work on my thoughts and I think success, it has a lot to do with that. And I love achieving goals and I love, being able to be on a show like this. Like this is cool, but also success is kind of for me having a business that I enjoy going to, having clients that I like to pick up the phone and talk to, being able to coach my kids and like being able to eat dinner with them and like laughing with them and seeing my friends. And so it's more of like success for me might not necessarily be being, you know, having 100 million, AUM or the biggest firm in town anymore, which I thought it was. And so, those kind of separating out what happiness is versus success. And like, I do like setting goals for the firm. I do like setting goals for myself, but also realizing that like enjoying that process and enjoying where I'm at today can be really, really cool as well. So I think success looks a little bit different than like being the biggest, most well known, but also just being like feeling like I'm doing good work and providing a service and can kind of, sleep well at night with what I'm, how I live my life.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Misty, for joining us on the Financial Advisor Success Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Want even more ideas, tools, and resources on how to break through to the next level of success as a financial advisor? Check out the leading financial planning industry blog, Nerd's Eye View, at www.kitces.com, where Michael covers the latest practice management trends and financial planning strategies. And by joining the members section, you can earn IMCA and CFP continuing education credits, along with exclusive member content. Get it all now at www.kitces.com.